back to the phone lines. We'll talk next to Kim in Maryland, listening on Sirius XM 131. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Hank. Thanks so much for taking my call, and thank you also for providing such a powerful, powerful ministry. I am calling regarding scripture memorization. And I listened to you speak about memorizing chapters in books, and I struggle terribly with just verse, and I'm wondering if you have any guidance that can help me out, or is it just a block that I'm not going to be able to get it? Or
no, I don't think it's a block that you're not going to be able to get it. In fact, I think that the whole of Scripture lets us know that the Bible is actually given to us in such a way that it is inherently memorable. If you look at the very early stages of human history, we see them outlined by Moses in Genesis in such a way that you can remember them with the 10 fingers of your hands. The way Jesus presents the Beatitudes is in an inherently memorable fashion. So the Bible was actually given in an oral culture. It was meant to be not only written down, but written down upon the tablet of your heart, as it were. As Jesus said, let these words sink into your ears. So I think that everyone can memorize, but it is a lost art in our culture. And because it's a lost art, so many people think, well, I just can't do it. But the reality is you can. Now, if you look at someone who has memorized a tremendous amount of Scripture, you say, wow, I can't do what that person does, and therefore you might give up. But what you ought to do rather than give up is set realistic goals. I often say he who aims at nothing invariably hits it. So you have to set realistic goals. And those goals have to become attainable goals. If your goals are unrealistic, you will undoubtedly become discouraged and give up. So if you say, I'm going to memorize a chapter a day, believe me, you're going to get discouraged and ultimately you're going to give up. Rather, what you ought to do is set these goals that are attainable. Maybe you say, I'm going to memorize a verse a month. Well, you say, that's not very much. I can do that very easily. Well, yeah, just memorize that verse and go over and over again for that month, and then the next month do another. At the end of the year, you'll have memorized 12 verses, which is probably more than you did last year. That's called setting an attainable goal. Now, once you can attain that goal, instead of it being an unfinished monument in your life, it becomes a light in your life, and you're saying, I did that. In fact, I can do more than that. And pretty soon you're going to be memorizing a verse a week. And now you're in the process of doing the very thing that the Bible calls us to do. Also, I would say this from a practical standpoint, to memorize with a family member or a friend. This is so important because then there's an accountability structure which really helps you in the process, like exercising with someone. Sometimes hard to do it on your own, but to do it with someone else makes it not only a joy, but gives you an accountability structure. And then I also use normally unproductive time to review what I have memorized. So I could be standing in a line, I could be waiting in the airport, I could be walking on the treadmill. There are 1,000 different applications a week, literally, in which you can review verses that you've already memorized, because you want to take these verses from the short term to the long term memory, and that's done by repetition and review. People used to laugh at me because I used to have a page out of the Bible. I had one Bible that I'd pull apart. I'd pull it apart page by page, stick the page in my wallet. I'd be standing in a line somewhere at a grocery line, and I'm kind of impatient anyway, and I pull that out, and I'd start reviewing or memorizing, and pretty soon I'd be at the cashier, and I'd think, wow, that went way too fast. So it really changes your perspective. But again, I think the real key is to set small, attainable goals to begin with.